Hello and welcome to the show. This rather weird vehicle is the first ever Jedi car that we ever drove on our channel. It is a Jeep Cherokee, and as you can see, it is very wobbly, basically. The suspension is all very soft, which makes it a very strange vehicle to drive. It was the first time we had ever driven a car with such a crazy setup on it. When I went back to drive this, to do the filming, it is remarkably tame compared to some of the ridiculous stuff we have driven since, but at the time this was a really rather stupid vehicle. As you can see, we go around the corners, it's lifting its front wheel up, it's bouncing all over the place. It's a strange old car to drive, it really is. It was such a big departure from the normal cars, which up until then we'd mostly been driving sensible vehicles, or sensible-ish anyway. The characteristics though that were most interesting about this particular Jedi Jeep and the ones that followed was its ability to roll over while going around a corner with you doing very, very little. You turn into a corner, you hold the steering, put the power down, and the car falls over. It was as simple as that. If you kept steering around a corner for long enough, it would just fling itself onto its roof. So for long corners and long fast corners, this was an incredibly hard vehicle to drive, because you would go to turn into a corner, you'd be holding the steering angle, and all of a sudden, at an almost random point it felt, the Jeep would fling itself onto its roof. We were tasked with doing a lap around the Nürburgring without rolling them, and I'm pretty sure we didn't. We received, and I've driven many variations of Jedi Jeeps over a period of time. This was another one that we got sent, a Ford Raptor, with each one being more crazy than the last. This one you didn't have to hold the steering on very long at all for it to want to fall over, as I managed to save it on that time. I guess you could say that the slight problem with these is as they became easier and easier to fall over, they became harder and harder to drive as normal cars. Again, I got very close to rolling it there. With the Jeep, it wasn't actually that bad to drive on the most part. It still drove like a normal car, apart from the bouncing around on the suspension. With this Raptor, it moves about in a straight line. It's got all sorts of cams and toes going on with it that make it a little bit of a weird car to drive in that respect. Like, you just couldn't really get it going in a straight line. But that's the price you pay for making it, well, do that. It doesn't take very much. I thought I got better with these cars. It's incredibly easy to run. That's the fun of these, really. At least that's what I found most interesting about them. It's not hard to have a car bounce around on the suspension. Any car can do it. But having a vehicle like this that rolls over the minute you try and go around a corner, that's what's interesting about the Jedi cars. That's what makes them fun to drive to me. That's what makes them more challenging and makes them more interesting. They were just incredible. The physics just gave up with them, basically. It was turn a corner and just throw the car somewhere. That's all the physics could do. It made for entertaining videos. If I'm honest, made for certainly an entertaining drive. Speed didn't really matter. You didn't have to be going very fast. As long as you were turning a corner sharply, that was more than enough to send it barrel rolling, and pretty damn spectacularly rolling as well, across the track. They were great vehicles, incredibly difficult to drive, as you could see, but certainly good for a laugh. Now, when it came to Forza 5, I think some of the first videos I did on here was trying to get vehicles to roll and so on. Unfortunately, you can't really make them the same. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't make, I think it was the Mercedes G-Wagon and a Land Rover. I really struggled to get them just to roll off a curb, let alone to roll on their own, just going round a corner, just turning a corner. I couldn't do it. This Ford Raptor, as you can see, gets an awful long way on two wheels, but it will not roll. It just won't do it. No matter what I do to the car, it just physically doesn't roll. Now, I'm not entirely sure the reason why it doesn't roll. Sometimes on some of the cars, they'll go up onto two wheels and something will scrape along the floor. And perhaps sometimes they have a little slightly funny hitbox when they're going on two wheels. We're taking Forza and doing stuff that we shouldn't really be doing with it. It's not designed for doing this with. Let's be honest. You get an interesting dance when you try to go down a straight with the Raptor. You can't do it. Because you go up on your side so much and then the game decides, nope, you can't do that, and drags you back down, despite it often feeling like, you know, your vehicle should be rolling over. So we come to the end of the straight at Silverstone, and still, it's just, I'm pretty sure this spent as much time on 2 wheels as it did on 4 wheels. It wants to be a motorbike. This Raptor, I love this shot coming down here as we come into the braking zone. We're going from side to side. It's a ridiculous sight. It's not the same as the previous ones. It's certainly silly watching a Raptor dance from side to side and trying to be a motorbike. But getting the vehicles to roll over was just something that I couldn't get them to do it. However, I was messing about with a Mercedes G-Wagon as the Raptor crosses the line on 2 wheels. I was waiting for start. I was having a real problem with the capture card, so I was messing about and was, prattling around with the tune on this, just fiddling with it, seeing if I could get it to do anything interesting. Again, got a lot of power in this car, and sort of all of the upgrades. The suspension was soft and bouncy and camber and so on, and it was doing pretty much the same as the cars normally were. Going on 2 wheels, something hit the floor, something scraped the floor, or it would just, some invisible force would grab the car and pull it back down. And then something amazing happened. I found out what you needed to make the cars roll, or at least to make this one roll. The trick with it was to put maximum toe in on both the front and rear. That is what, for the G-Wagon, would cause it to actually sort of complete the roll. It would get a lot on its side, but unless you had the toe in, it would never fall over. Something would always stop the car from rolling over. For some reason, and I have absolutely no clue what it is, when you put toe in on the G-Wagon, we have our proper Jenny car back. A car that turns a corner and falls over. There is some slight downsides of toe in that it makes the car utterly undrivable. But never mind too much about that. It was I was amazed to find that this car was actually falling over. Now, on this particular run, I'd forgotten to turn damage on cosmetic only, and I'd managed to break the rear suspension. Turns out, breaking the rear suspension is also pretty good for making your car do very strange things, especially when you've got the suspension set up as I do here. It just amplifies the bounciness that goes on with this car. What I was finding that while getting these to roll over around a corner was very tricky, getting them to bounce from side to side while going down a straight was remarkably easy. And with the broken suspension in the Mercedes, I managed to roll in a straight line, which is quite impressive. And then I managed to roll trying to point backwards or forwards again. That's the way I put it. Yeah, broken suspension is more effective than anything I could do with the setup, I think, for making these cars roll. I then tried to see if I could make it roll by doing a donut, which apparently you can't. I did manage to get the front wheel just about up in the air, but yeah, the G-Wagon actually rolled properly, which filled me with confidence. I then went off to try with some other vehicles. The Range Rover, a car that I spent so long trying to get it to roll off a curb, and eventually did, via pure luck. I tried applying an identical setup onto here as I had on the G-Wagon. Unfortunately, with the Range Rover, it wasn't to be. For whatever reason, whatever it is that stops these cars from rolling, the toe-in could not overcome it with the Range Rover. I'm really not quite sure what it is that it doesn't like. I tried. It would go up onto 2 wheels, and then it would fall down. All of the aero bits are on here simply because that was what was working on the Mercedes, so I thought I'll copy it exactly. I've faffed about with the setup for some time on the Range Rover. Couldn't get it to do any better than this. Doesn't matter, 4-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive. I could not make it actually roll over. I could get it to go round and go on 2 wheels, but it would never fall over properly. The Range Rover was, though, of all the cars, by far the worst to drive with this toe-in. I then had to go on the Jeep. Seeing as this was the first Jelly car, I thought I would give this one a go. Perhaps it would work on Forza 5, with my newfound knowledge that the toe-in was very important. Unfortunately, not again. The same thing happened with the Jeep as was happening with all of the other vehicles. Go up on its side. It would go quite a long way up on its side. It was quite a ridiculous car, this, to be honest. Again, I think this is another NASCAR engine one. The Land Rover had the Enzo V12 in it, so plenty of power in these. It would go up on its side and then go and proceed to scrape the floor and eventually give up. I had to go with a Hummer for reasons of Hummer. Hummer is not a very good Jedi car for this. Well, yes, you can have a fair amount of ride height and you can bounce it around on the suspension, sure. You're not going to roll it. Of all the cars, this was probably the least close, furthest away, that's better English, to rolling. I think because it's too wide. The G-Wagon was good, I think anyway, for falling over because it was quite narrow. Whereas this is very wide, and while, you know, is getting on two wheels just about through some of the corners, this never even got close to falling over, which is a bit of a shame. I think this has got the highest ride height of all the cars, so the ride height wasn't massively important. Well, it was important. You needed a certain amount of ride height to be able to do this. But having the huge amounts that the Hummer did wasn't a huge advantage over the other cars that we have here. Up next, a GMC Vandura that eats the camera. This one was getting some interesting two-wheeled action, and for an awful long time it looked like this wasn't going to roll either. It was doing the same old thing of up on the side and then falling back down for no apparent reason. That's what the camera angles, sorry, Forza replays are useless at some points on the track, and then for no real reason, the Vandura decided, no, I'll let you have this one. You can fall over this time around. I don't know what I did differently on that particular attempt, but it was enough to get the Vandura to actually fall over properly. And then as I was completing the race to save the replay or whatever, I managed to get the Vandura to fall over sort of in a straight line. I was trying to get it back on the track, so I was steering. I wasn't going around a corner though. Yeah, the Vandura can fall over. Okay, this is not the narrowest of cars, but again, I think it is a little bit to do with the width of the vehicle is helping on that case. Our final vehicle, though, is by far my proudest achievement of tuning of cars. This is a Ford F100 that falls over everywhere. I'm pretty sure that was 30, 40 miles an hour. Forward, turn, falls over. It is like the Jedi cars of old from Forza 4 in that respect. In other respects, it isn't. But it does not take very much at all to make this car fall over. Turn into a corner and the chances are it's going to roll. I'm not sure why in particular this car is so good at rolling. It hasn't got the highest ride height here. It's not as narrow as I think the G-Wagon and perhaps the Vandura. If anything, I would expect this one here not to work because of the side skirts. As you can see, the side skirts scrape along the floor. But for the F100, it's fine with it. It will let the van or the truck, pick up, whatever, roll over without any problems. It's back to the similar sort of levels of crazy as we had with the Raptor. It really is. It's just turn a corner and fall over. And if you don't fall over, you're probably going to spin out. However, as I said, there are some downsides, and I still cannot, and I don't think you ever will, be able to make a Jedi car the same way that we had on Forza 4. In that, to make this Ford do the silly things that it does, again, falling over in a straight line, you have to run the maximum toe in. And that makes it near impossible to drive, because you will be going along down a straight and the car will just weave from side to side, so you're constantly fighting this car to even get in a straight line. I don't think I got it above more than 60 or 70 as we do a little dance down the back straight to Silverstone. This is with a NASCAR engine in the Ford. We're doing a little bit of rallycross as well. It's fine. Look, nothing possibly has it's gone wrong now. As we it is incredibly easy to make this thing roll over, but it doesn't have the handling. You saw when I drove the Raptor at the start, that was fairly sensible. It wobbled a little bit in a straight, but it was, apart from when it came to the corners, you could kind of drive it almost like a normal car. You had to be careful for extended cornering, but the rest of it was alright. This is completely useless, just absolutely useless. You can't keep it in a straight line. It's almost pointless to try. It falls over absolutely everything, which is kind of the idea. But yeah, I tried taking the toe in off the Ford, and then it doesn't roll over anywhere near as much. It is possible to just about make it roll over, but it doesn't do this. So yeah, can we make a Jedi car in the same respects as we could in Forza 4? Not really, but I have managed to make a car that falls over every time you go around a corner, which is kind of what I wanted to do. So I'll take it as a victory on this one. Anyway, people are probably wondering quite what the setup is that I used for this one. So go to upgrade shop and show you. Engine-wise, of course, gone for as much power as possible. To be honest, it doesn't matter hugely, as I was falling over at like 40 in this, but you might as well go for as much power. I also like how, because of the the cambers and stuff, it fails the benchmark. You know you got a terrible handling car when it fails. Fails the 0 to 100 mile an hour test. Other parts, you want all the handling upgrade bits so that you can adjust all of the settings. The weight, sometimes I left the weight in. The Mercedes G-Wagon, I kept that with the full weight in it. With this, I took the weight out and it made it a little bit better at falling around, but it will do a very similar thing if you keep the maximum weight in. To be honest, a lot of it comes down to the toe. The toe seems to be the most significant thing with this car. Tyre-wise is another important thing. You want to have as much grip as possible, so you're going to be wanting some race tyres. I have tried with drag tyres before, and you get too much understeer. They slide across the track too much. Maximum tyre widths, of course. So yeah, you need to get as much grip out of the car as possible if you want it to be doing that sort of crazy stuff. Now aero, what I chose to do was put front and rear aero on the car and then remove all of the aero. That's what I did with the Mercedes, and the Mercedes fell over, so that's what I did on everything else. I did fiddle around with it a little bit, didn't seem to make a huge amount of difference, to be honest, but seeing as it worked with the G-Wagon, I thought I'd make it work elsewhere. And again, drivetrain, this one was rear-wheel drive, the Merc was four-wheel drive. I tried various four-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive. It didn't seem to make a huge difference if the car was four-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. Is pretty much the same. The settings then, this is what we used on the alignment. Maximum negative camber, maximum toe in, and I put the front caster onto high. This was guesswork. The Mercedes worked. I put it on the other cars. They worked. If you take the toe in off, it doesn't work. It'll go on its side. It'll never fall over. And the other stuff, I just kept it where it was, as that's what works basically. So I didn't see any need to be fiddling. I put the anti-roll bars down to soft, the springs all the way down to soft. The ride height, of course, very important. You've got to have that all the way to high. Yeah, I mean, if you want it to be bouncing around on the suspension in the first place, you need all of these settings, all of this stuff here to be on the maximum soft, and then took all the aero off as well. Yeah, that's how I got the Ford to roll over. I tweaked the other cars and I couldn't get them to do anything. The Jeep, the Land Rover, no matter what I did with them, I couldn't get them to roll over. That was the best settings that I could get for these vehicles, and it was the closest I could get them to rolling, and getting this one to work, and the G-Wagon to fall over. Yeah, the Ford F100 is ridiculous. It really is. I was not expecting to have a car fall over that easily, but there you go. If you want to have a car that falls over every time you go around a corner, then you can with the Ford F100. It's pretty close to the Forza 4 Jedi cars, not quite though, but it fell over plenty, so can't complain too much. Anyway, that is it for this video, guys, so thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.